We celebrate today the first martyrs of the city of Rome. And they're not the very first martyrs. The first martyrs could perhaps be considered St. Peter and Paul, whom we celebrated yesterday. But what we celebrate today are the martyrs of, say, that first generation after Saints Peter and Paul, as the church in Rome had really grown in large part because of their ministry and of their witness. In the year 64, under the Emperor Nero, there was a great persecution, and the numbers are unclear as to how many Christians were killed. In the least, it was in the thousands. And some scholars estimate that it could have been in the tens of thousands. If you make a pilgrimage to Rome today, there are certain churches where you can go where they have collected the remains of some of these martyrs. And you just see collections of bones and bones and bones. Hundreds and hundreds of people, their remains collected in one place. One cannot really imagine, I think, the true horror unless one has really seen up close and personally the horrors of modern warfare, perhaps. Then one could get a sense of what was going on in Rome. It's from this time that we have such stories that the Emperor Nero decided he wanted torches to light his gardens on the Vatican Hill. So he had human torches with Christians being set on fire all around the gardens to light them. What are we to make of such accounts? Well, we hear from the prophet Amos this morning. We hear him saying to the people of Israel, look, you need to pay attention to what's going on around you. Look at all of these things. And he does something that Jesus will later do. He points out to the people, like, you understand the basic principle of cause and effect. You know that certain things don't just happen on their own without some underlying cause. And yet you are missing the point that there are major events transpiring around you and within your own communities. But you seem to remain completely oblivious to the fact that through them God is urging you to pay attention to something. And we find ourselves often doing that to this very day. You have heard me say before about the whole pandemic situation that I am not interested in engaging the debate of whether this is something that God is actively causing or sending upon us as a punishment. It's possible that it is. It's possible it is coincidence. It's possible it is a consequence, not a punishment. But setting all of that aside, here is where I do think it's important we engage. What can we learn from it? As we look around our world, as we see how things are unfolding around us, disease, famine, violence and war, death, these things are not happening without cause. And we would be foolish to fail to explore what those causes are, how we might bear some responsibility for them, and therefore what is within our power to control, to stop them, or at least to mitigate them. We see in the example of the martyrs an embrace of this higher calling, an embrace of God's love that allows them to accept even unjust persecution. But even the martyrs understand that in following Jesus Christ, there are going to be consequences. The martyrs understand that following Jesus Christ puts them at odds with the values of the world. It puts them within the crosshairs of Satan. And the martyrs understand that to follow the Lord is not going to be an easy journey. It will be one that involves suffering and sacrifice. But they accept those consequences. They accept them in love. And therefore, the destruction of their bodies is not something that leads to the destruction of faith. In fact, it does quite the opposite. It allows their witness to be so compelling to the world. Even as they suffer, because they suffer in love and for love, it can give even their persecutors this moment of pause to say, wait a minute, there's something underlying this desire. There is something causing this courage, this trust, this serenity, even in the midst of being fed to lions, being burned alive, being tortured in innumerable other cruel, savage ways. How can it be that in the midst of the storms of such a persecution, these so-called followers of Jesus, how can it be that they experience all of this with acceptance, with serenity, with peace? And how can it be, and this ultimately is the moment of conversion, and we hear accounts of this throughout the history of the church, that persecutors of Christians were themselves converted to Christ by the witness of the martyrs, because they get to the next question. And it's what compels them. They ask themselves, how can it be that I am attracted to this peace, even though I see the consequences of the name of Jesus Christ and claiming that I belong to him? As those early apostles were there in the boat, lamenting the storm, but saw that Jesus could calm it, the martyrs show us the next step. Being in the midst of the storm and not crying out, but trusting that we do worship the one whom even the wind and the waves obey, and that in his hands all will be well. Through their intercession, may we have both the wisdom to look into the signs of our times, to recognize what God is trying to say to us now, and the courage to carry it through, to carry it out.